Neil Harrington, Senior Vice President of the Americas at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. I'm thrilled to welcome all of you today, beginning with the Honorable Doug Ford, Premier of the great province of Ontario. Premier, it's so great to have you with us. And I want to thank all of our distinguished visitors from Ontario, beginning with the Premier, for helping us make the case that this event should actually take place, given the current inclement weather forecast. We have a rather dubious track record here of closing things down at the mere hint of light precipitation. So we made the case that we convinced the powers that be that if we canceled today's event, we would only be a laughing stock in front of our truly hardy northern neighbors. So here we are. Seriously, it really is a privilege to welcome so many great friends back to Washington. I want to start with the Premier and his team, Ministers Fedeli and Lecce, who are regulars here on the circuit in Washington, which is a great thing. The action's all happening here, right? So good to have you guys. I haven't seen him, but I'm pretty sure he's here. Goldie Hyder, who obviously are the champion of our Business Council of Canada, and the great group of CEOs he brings with him. There he is. He shouldn't be in the back. Come on, come find your seat up here. And then with him is a great group of CEOs with the Business Council, one of whom is Rob Wildeboer, the chairman and co-founder of the great Ontario company Martin Rea, which has a huge footprint in all 3 North American countries and chairs our U.S.-Mexico CEO dialogue, too. I want to also welcome Dan Tisch, our counterpart in the Ontario Provincial Chamber of Commerce, and of course, David Patterson and his great team at the province's office here at the Embassy in Canada. So speaking of friendship, I'd like to start there in my brief remarks, introduction of the Premier. We understand that some in Canada question whether America still cherishes the bonds that over time have made us the best of friends, the closest of allies, and each other's best customers. It's the reason that the Chamber's late former CEO, Tom Donahue, who many of you knew well, used to quip, and I quote, "As Canadians, it's imperative that you understand that you aren't just our friends, you're our family. And the reason we know this to be true is that we'd never dare to treat our friends so poorly." So make no mistake, the U.S. business community truly values our close partnership with Canada, with the province of Ontario, and beyond. As companies and organizations, yes, but also deeply on a personal level. We'll appropriately talk about a lot of trade today, but as you know well, our relationship is about so much more. Americans will never forget that tens of thousands of brave Canadians fought side by side with us and perished in World Wars I and II while standing up for our shared values and principles. We'll never forget the 165 valiant Canadians who gave their lives for us in Afghanistan in answering our call to, for the first time, invoke NATO's Article 5. And for more of us than you think, Canada is deeply personal. For me, it's cherished childhood memories. Salmon fishing with my grandfather every summer in Campbell River, BC. A magical town of incredible people who essentially adopted my grandfather in his retirement. So here's the thing. Whenever challenged, we've emerged stronger, more economically integrated, and better prepared to face our true shared economic and geopolitical challenges. That was absolutely the case during the renegotiation of the NAFTA in 2017. Since 2020's entry into force, USMCA CUSMA, as it's known by our northern brothers and sisters, has bestowed us with the modern trade agreement that is responsible for helping the U.S. increase our sale of goods to Canada, our very best customers, by 20%. Emerging stronger from our current challenges starts by avoiding a costly trade war. At the Chamber, we're certainly cognizant of the damage tariffs would exact on our most critical partners, Canada and Mexico. But make no mistake that we are laser focused on the damage they'd inflict, or more accurately, self-inflict, on American consumers, farmers, and manufacturers. As Chamber President and CEO Suzanne Clark said during her State of American Business speech last month, tariffs are a tax paid by Americans, and their broad, indiscriminate use would stifle growth at the worst possible time. And if you track recent surveys, Americans roundly agree with Suzanne. A poll last month by the Wall Street Journal revealed that 68% of respondents believe new tariffs would raise prices. In a recent Fox News poll, just 1% of voters indicated that tariffs should be a priority of the new administration. On the contrary, 50% of respondents believe that imposing tariffs on imports will hurt the economy rather than help it. Such polling can likely be traced to multiple recent studies that have indicated the inflationary effect that tariffs would have on sectors critical to the U.S. economy. For Americans filling up their car in the Midwest and Rocky Mountain states, tariffs on Canadian oil would drive up the price of gasoline by as much as 75 cents a gallon. This in turn would raise costs for all kinds of retail goods transported around our country. For those of us in the market for a new car, tariffs could drive up the price of a new car by as much, even an inexpensive car, by as much as $3,000. And in a country already facing housing affordability challenges, tariffs would add $40 billion to the $150 billion of cement, lumber, metals, minerals, and other materials that we import from Canada alone in support of our construction industry. With regard to the steel and aluminum tariffs on U.S. trade partners that the White House announced last night, the challenge with aluminum is particularly acute. U.S. aluminum producers simply have no capacity to replace imports, as net imports meet more than 80% of our domestic demand. And where do roughly 60% of those imports come from? That's correct, from our great family in Canada. We must and we will get past the threat to the focus on the economic fundamentals that enable us not just to trade with each other, but to prosper together. We've become so integrated that we even trade world-class hockey players. As a child of the American Southwest, I never could have dreamed that one of my own, a California-born, Arizona-raised kid with Mexican roots, could one day captain the Leafs. We're very excited about that. But here we are, another sign of the truly indispensable and unbreakable economic, social interdependence of the three North American partners. As we look ahead to the emerging economic opportunities and promise to integrate even more, we are honored to have Premier Ford with us today to share his innovative Fortress AmCan strategy. Those of us watching the Super Bowl got a sneak peek of this strategy through Ontario's catchy ad campaign, which we can unequivocally agree was better than the game itself. It's true. The Premier envisions an even more robust partnership than we already share in critical sectors such as agriculture, automotive, energy, and critical minerals. As all of you know, the Premier is a staunch defender not only of his remarkable country, but of our shared prosperity. As the leader of the great province of Ontario, which accounts for nearly 40% of the country's GDP, and is the #1 export destination for 17 U.S. states, #2 for 11 others, he brings an important voice and vision at a really critical time. Premier Ford, we're thrilled that you could join us today. We're honored to have you. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, first of all, thank you, Neil, and I just want to welcome everyone here today. And before I get started with my speech, just give you a little background. Some know, some don't know. You know, I spent 20 years of my life in the U.S. in our Chicago facility and in our New Jersey facility. I traveled to every single state, almost every single day. I'd wake up in the morning in a hotel room and a lot of you feel the same way. You wake up and you wonder, where are you for a second before it snaps in. But I just want to tell you, I love the U.S. I love the American people. I love the Canadian people, and I know Americans I speak to, and I know thousands of people, they say the same thing. They love Canada, and Canadians love America. So thank you for coming. Yeah. It's such a real honor to be here today with so many business leaders from Canada and across the United States. Alongside, and I brought a couple of friends, I call them my champions, alongside Vic Fideli, Ontario's Minister of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade, and he's instrumental in making sure that both sides of the border see economic development and thrive and prosper and grow. So, Vic, if you want to just stand up for a second and say hello. I call Vic my number one salesperson. I also brought along Stephen Lecce, a great Minister of Energy and Electrification, and he is moving that file forward like we've never seen. We're leaders in the nuclear sector with small modular reactors, and there's no one more we want to send energy to than our friends, our family members in the U.S., as you were saying, Neil, and I've been using that terminology, family members, for forever. So thank you, Stephen, and let's keep working on those SMRs and creating more opportunities for both sides of the border. I couldn't think of a better place to start our mission to Washington than the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And Neil, thank you so much for hosting us and having us by. Over the last few weeks and months, a lot has been said about the strength of the U.S.-Canada relationship. You know, as you were saying, you know, the two strongest allies and friends in the world, two treasured allies, and just standing shoulder to shoulder on so many crises that both our countries have faced over decades. Decades of economic growth through free trade, millions of jobs created on both sides of the border, countless lives sacrificed in battle in defense of our common values. All of this is true. And it's so important to remember everything we've achieved together. But now, more than ever, we need to focus on the future. And we need to be clear, very clear-eyed, about the real risk we're facing right now, about the true trade war we're waging, which is, in my opinion, is totally unnecessary, which will hurt both countries dramatically, about our common economic enemy, and I'll tell you who our common economic enemy is. As the whole world is watching two closest friends about to wage an economic war against each other, the world is watching carefully. A lot of the world is saying, we're next. A lot of the world is sitting back and laughing. And I'll tell you who's sitting back and laughing is China. China's sitting back and thinking we couldn't ask for a better plan than this. Over the last few months, I've met and spoken with senators, congressmen and women, governors from every region of America and from both sides of the aisle. And I'll tell you what they say. They won't say it publicly. They say, this is the craziest thing I've ever heard. And no matter if it's Democrat or Republican, I have yet to hear one elected official down here and say, that's a great idea. Let's attack Canada economically. It's never been said. I've yet to meet one CEO, and I've talked to endless CEOs, say, let's go after Canada. Every single U.S. corporation, their headquarters, for the most part, not all, but a good chunk of them, probably 85%, they're located in Toronto or Ontario somewhere. And the supply chain is so integrated. In these conversations, I've promoted Ontario's close economic partnership with the United States, a relationship built on more than $365 billion in balanced two-way trade. I've never seen anything like it. It's literally split right down the center. Trade that benefits both equally. Ontario is America's third largest trading partner in the world. Just think, and I never recommend this, if Ontario was a standalone country, it would be your third largest trading partner in the world. As you were saying, Neil, we're the #1 export destination for 17 states and #2 to 11 others. When I'm on the media, I like saying customer. I'm a business guy. I'm not a politician. And I don't see eye to eye with politicians, but that's another whole story. And government drives me crazy. That's another whole story, but we'll chat another day. But that's what I look at it as, you know, you're our largest customer, we're your largest customer. And each and every day, think of this, 9 million Americans wake up to go to work and earn a paycheck by making something that's sold to a customer in Ontario. So they're making products for people in Ontario. Now, what they don't say in this speech is 28 states around the U.S., their number one customer is Canada. Ontario has 17 and 11 of number two. In my conversations with U.S. lawmakers, I've also heard serious concerns about China, about how China is ripping off American workers by flooding markets and hijacking global supply chains. America has had enough, American workers have had enough, and I've had enough. In response, U.S. lawmakers are leading the most ambitious economic realignment in the past 100 years. They're decoupling from China and its global proxies. Doing so will be no easy task. It will require long-term thinking. It will require dedication, and most of all, it will require friends and allies like Canada and Ontario, and I can tell you, Canada's here to help. Working together, Canada and the U.S. can be the richest, most successful, safest, most secure two countries on the entire planet when we're working together. We can usher in a new American-Canadian century, what President Trump calls new golden age. We do so by building Fortress AMCAN. Fortress AMCAN is a renewed alliance between America and Canada that's a beacon of stability, security, and long-term economic growth on both sides of the border. First, Fortress AMCAN promotes free, fair, and balanced trade. Fair trade means fighting back against freeloaders that rip off workers by taking advantage of free trade agreements designed to protect jobs at home. I'm talking about China. Together, let's put an end to Chinese transshipments through Mexico into American and Canadian markets. Every member of the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement needs to match or exceed U.S. tariffs on Chinese products. Electric vehicles, batteries, and in particular, aluminum and steel all need matching tariffs. If they fail to do so, they should lose their seat at the table. I always say, if you don't play fair in a deal, no matter if it's business or politics, you should excuse yourself from the table. And let's protect against Chinese investment and ownership in strategically important sectors, such as critical minerals and energy. Canada and the United States and Mexico all need strong, robust investment review processes designed to block Chinese investments aimed at undermining our economies. Second, let's grow the AMCAN economy for AMCAN workers. Fortress AMCAN needs to take action to reshore supply chains, attract investments, and bring good jobs back home for workers on both sides of the border. We do so by streamlining regulations to promote economic integration, and by eliminating anti-worker, anti-business taxes. You know, folks, I can tell you, I've been in office for 7 years. I don't believe in taxes. Government doesn't have an income problem, they have a spending problem. We have never, ever raised taxes from the day we've been in office. Matter of fact, through great leadership of my friends sitting in the front row, we reduced the cost of doing business in Ontario by $8 billion each and every single year. Well, I can see there's some Ontario folks in here too clapping because they're getting the benefits of that $8 billion, including by scrapping Canada's digital service tax and the Canadian carbon tax. Those are two terrible taxes, by the way. Third, we need to accelerate strategic resource development. I'm calling for a new AMCAN Critical Mineral Security Alliance, an alliance that invests and builds out American and Canadian critical mineral supply chains, so we're less dependent on China, on Russia, and other countries that don't share our democratic values. As we do, we need to speed up regulatory approvals. Fortress AMCAN will designate areas where multiple critical minerals are present or likely to be present, including the Ring of Fire region in Ontario, the largest critical mineral deposit in the entire world. As regions of strategic importance to the national security of Canada and the United States, these regions will be supported with a special approvals process that cuts down timelines to get minerals out of the ground, processed, and shipped to factory floors. The same kind of necessary regulatory reform being led by the Trump administration. Fourth, we'll achieve AMCAN energy security to power AMCAN economic growth. Fortress AMCAN should be powered by AMCAN energy of every type, energy that is produced, consumed, and creates jobs in every single region in both countries. I want to further integrate our energy and electricity grids. People don't realize, as we stand right here, right now, we can deliver from Ontario electricity as far south as Florida. In just a moment's notice, we can flick on the switch or flick off the switch. I prefer flicking on all the switches, and encourage more exports of Canadian energy and electricity to the U.S. to power your economic growth. Fifth, Fortress AMCAN will protect AMCAN land, air, Arctic, water, and communities. Canada needs to demonstrate that we take our shared security seriously. It's not only what President Trump has asked, it's the right thing to do. It's why Ontario launched Operation Deterrence, working with fixed-wing aircraft, helicopters, drones, off-road vehicles, boats, and foot patrol. Over 200 dedicated officers have already conducted 10,000 hours of focused patrol to detect, disrupt, and deter illegal cross-border activity. Operation Deterrence has already led to hundreds of charges against illegal border crossers, against people smuggling illegal drugs, stolen vehicles, and illegal firearms across the border. But when it comes down to it, we need to do more. I'm urging Canada's federal government to pass strict new mandatory minimum sentences and other reforms so any thug convicted of trafficking fentanyl or illegal drugs get thrown in jail for good. That's it. They're gone, they're done. Ontario and the federal government will also work together to get at the root cause of drug smuggling. We'll audit any bank, credit union, or financial institution suspected of financing gangs or cartels. And finally, we will keep pushing our federal government to do its part by exceeding Canada's 2% NATO defense spending commitment. Friends, this is Fortress AMCAN. This is a way forward. It's a vision that respects each country as proudly independent, and it celebrates what we can achieve together. Let's stop wasting time and energy and effort fighting each other, threatening tariffs that will only hurt workers, hurt businesses, and cost more for families, hurting hard-working people just looking to get ahead in life. Instead, let's focus on restoring the pride of Made in the USA and Made in Canada. Let's be unapologetic as we stand up for American and Canadian workers. Today, let's usher in the new American and Canadian century, a new golden age. Let's build Fortress AMCAN. Thank you, and may God bless the people of America, and may God bless the people of Canada. Thank you so much.
Thank you, gentlemen. Your enthusiasm is contagious. I think we're all ready to stand up for the bilateral relationship, and I really appreciate you taking the time to follow up on that really, I think, terrific set of remarks with kind of delving a little bit deeper on the strategy. I really appreciated how you raised, one thing you raised, I think very appropriately, is that there are synergies with the Trump administration in areas like regulatory reform. I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about some of the reforms you envision that can complement the strategy. And you and I were talking off stage. One of the ones that we're really focused on in this country is permitting reform.
Yes.
We are wretched in this country, permitting reform. The stat we always use is it takes twice as long to permit a project as it does to build it across infrastructure. So talk to us about that part of your vision too, in terms of how regulatory reform in general can complement this very innovative strategy.
Well, first of all, thank you, Neil. And red tape and regulations, they drive me crazy. We've cut over $1 billion of red tape and regulations in Ontario, but let me point out two that would really help the U.S. and Canada. One, making sure that when we're shipping 4.4 million barrels or 1.2 billion barrels a year to support the energy needs of our allies and friends south of the border, what we should be doing is building that Keystone pipeline going south. I always say we need 4 pipelines, going north, going south, going east, and going west. And we don't have to rely on anyone else. We don't have to be going down to Venezuela or wherever to get your energy. We have it right here. We can be self-sufficient between the two countries, but not just self-sufficient. We can sell that oil around the world rather than depending on countries that don't even like us selling us the oil. So we need to focus on that. Critical minerals. I'm not too sure if any of the folks in this room have heard of the Ring of Fire. It's the largest critical mineral deposit in the world. Has every type of critical mineral there is. Well, the regulations have been working on this for 30 years. It's unacceptable. We believe in working collaboratively and cooperatively with our First Nations community, which we have. They're on board. But when you're trying to drill a test hole, and these drills are only 4.5 inches in diameter, and they give you every bit of regulation why you can't drill that hole. Well, things are going to change. Yes, do I call this an economic crisis we're at the peak of? But every crisis, as we know, there's opportunities. There's opportunities to get critical minerals out of the ground, get them processed, and get them into the factory floors right across the U.S. and Canada. And when China, everyone sees China, they cut the U.S. off of critical minerals for any of their weapons or manufacturing, because they don't want you to compete. They don't want you to be a military powerhouse, which U.S. is already, as they're trying to catch up. Who has those critical minerals? Canada has those critical minerals. And if you look at our high-grade nickel as well, there's nickel coming from, I don't know, Indonesia, maybe Australia, but it's low-grade nickel. And 50% of the high-grade nickel that the U.S. wants and needs comes from Ontario. And I want to ship you more high-grade nickel. I keep saying high-grade. That is absolutely critical. Excuse the pun, but it's critical. The high-grade nickel. And the list keeps going on and on and on. We have one of the largest trade shows in the world on critical minerals. I think it's in March, the beginning of March. I encourage you to come up. And people from all over the world are coming to Ontario for the minerals show, the mining show, I should say.
Terrific. I think that I'm really glad you raised this issue in the context of China, too.
Yes.
You said it very well in your remarks, but you also know that there are very few topics that are bipartisan in Washington these days. China is certainly one of them. We've done a fair bit of talking here. You took some action in the province in terms on Chinese procurement
That's right.
and issuing some restrictions. Talk to us a little bit about that in some detail.
Well, we're just very simple. We're banning China from any investments in critical minerals. They'll use those critical minerals to come back and haunt us one day in Canada and the U.S. Who do we want to give them to? Closest friends and allies, the U.S. And we need to make sure that we start speeding up, just like President Trump said. Let's speed up the process. It just goes on and on and on. Well, things are going to change. I think both countries need to change. We need to get shovels in the ground, critical minerals out and into the factory floors.
Yeah. Well said. Very well said. That should be all of our goals jointly. You hit on another, I think, really important topic in your remarks for the U.S. business community. Mm-hmm. We're going to get past, I'm confident, we're going to get past this stage of tariff threats and threatened tariff war. The next stage is, which could come in very quick sequence, will be the Kuzma review.
Yes.
A huge challenge that we at the Chamber have been certainly illustrating for now the last 2 years plus is the lack of compliance and enforcement from all three governments. Each one of them, the automotive sector that's critical to the province, the U.S., there was a decision in Canada's and in Mexico's favor that's more than a year and a half old, that the panel, dispute resolution panel, ruled in Canada and Mexico's favor against the U.S., and the U.S. has still not implemented that ruling. That's an example of something that the U.S. has to comply with. You raised the DST, the Digital Services Tax. Yes. Another issue for us in the private sector is C11, online streaming bill. Tell me a little bit more about sort of how you're approaching those kind of discriminatory measures from the province. I appreciated your strong statement, mm-hmm. and why you think they're impediments also to our shared prosperity and shared progress.
Well, we have unnecessary taxes, the DST. Every Republican, every Democrat agrees. We shouldn't have that tax. We shouldn't have a federal carbon tax that makes us uncompetitive around the world. It just adds cost onto the goods that we manufacture across the board. Let's cut the regulations. Let's get things moving. We know China, there's no regulations there. They get a phone call and say, start digging, and that's it. And that's what happens. And manufacturing, they can build a city of 1 million people in 3-4 years. Yeah. It just goes up. So I just can't emphasize enough that with the USMCA deal, we have to come together, and whoever doesn't want to play at the table fairly, then they leave the table, and then we move on. But I think it's so important that we have 3 great countries, and we move together, because if you put everything aside, it's us against the world. I'll tell you that right now. When all heck breaks loose, and hopefully that will never happen, well, who do you turn to? You turn to your family members. And I'm going to give you a little story, and this has nothing to do with the USMCA, but we've had the threats of tariffs go, and and when that hurricane hit North Carolina and Florida, without asking, we sent endless amount of, we call them hydro linemen, electricity linemen. They loaded up their trucks, they headed down there. And then the California fires. And sure enough, the tariffs were peaking a little bit. We put a call out in Ontario to urban firefighters. We had more urban firefighters ready to suit up. We had to cap it at 300, ready to hop on the plane, put their lives in danger to protect our family members. We had water bombers already stationed. We flew them out to BC to fly down there. Unfortunately, the story goes, they said they didn't have the water for the water bombers. But my point here is, when a family member needs help, you put everything else aside and you go help them. Because I know Americans would do the same for Canada.
Thank you. It should have been in my open, because as a native Californian, we're grateful. Yeah, we are grateful. As a Southern Californian, I say that. And that it really is the case. And that was obviously the case in obviously the terrible Canadian wildfires of 2 summers ago, right? I mean, we all, you're right. Family comes to each other's side. That's exactly right, in times of need. It's very well said. And you very correctly hit on the other bipartisan issue in Washington, besides China, which is the DST, you're absolutely right, and discriminatory taxes, so thank you for that.
It's terrible.
So I want to, and maybe we'll make this the final question, because I want to be very cognizant of your time. Obviously, the announcement yesterday, 25% tariffs imposed as of March 4th on aluminum and steel on all of our trade partners, including our closest allies. I want to get your thoughts on that.
Well, I have to be honest, I was disappointed. President Trump said, hey, you have 30 days, let's work it out. And bingo, a couple days later, he wakes up and the rules changed, the goalposts changed. I'm thinking, I'm a type of person, when you give someone your word and you shake their hand, not that I shook the president's hand, but when you shake their hand, it's golden. You do not move from those rules. So let's talk about aluminum and steel. Yes, we ship a boatload of aluminum, especially from Quebec, because the U.S. needs it. That's the reason we ship it down there. And then they do amazing thing. This is what the supply chain does, and it's so important so we ship the aluminum down, and no matter if it's beverage companies, Coca-Cola or Pepsi, that aluminum goes down, the cans are printed, and they added value. And those same cans get shipped back up to Ontario or wherever they're filling. They get filled. That's the same as our 2 largest breweries, Molson's and Labatt's. They ship the aluminum down, they print those cans, and this is totaling close to $1 billion. And then you add more value. The big soup company, I'm not going to mention them, world famous soup company out in New Jersey. They put added value. They take the aluminum, they make the cans, they put the label on, they put that great soup, because I love that soup, and they ship all that soup all the way, across Canada. So it's added value. So when you tariff the aluminum, all it's going to do is it's a tax on the people. It's going to be a tax on the American people, because everything is going to go up that's made from aluminum. And that's the same as steel. The auto sector, we buy as many cars as we ship down. And the cars that are made contain 50% American parts. And Rob knows, Rob's an absolute champion, a true leader. And, and steel, that the cars are made, a lot of steel comes from the U.S. to make some of the cars in Canada that get shipped down. And, when it comes to supply chain, as one of my friends told me before we came in here, you can't unscramble the egg, you got to make a larger omelet. That's right. Because you just can't, after 1960s, I got to give David, our friend, that credit, but, you just can't flick a switch in the auto sector that's had the auto pack since 1960s. As you've all heard, auto parts go back and forth across the border up to 7-8 times. And then it gets assembled either in Michigan or another auto plant or up in Ontario. That's the way it works, and it works well, and everyone benefits. And all my point today, Neil, is let's grow a stronger, more resilient, prosperous, the 2 greatest countries in the world. Let's work together and protect ourselves from the likes of China or the likes of Russia. They do not like us. I'll call a spade. They want to hurt America and in return hurt their family member, Canada. But together, we are unstoppable. But Neil, I just want to thank you again. I want to thank all the folks here. And if you're ever up in Toronto, please give me a call on my cell phone. And I give it out publicly. So by all means, just go online. Doug Ford's cell number will pop up. Text me. Yeah, honestly, that's the way it works. I'm not joking. I get 1,000 messages a day. But I'll guarantee you one thing, you're getting a call back. It might be a day later, but But again, I just want to emphasize two greatest countries in the world. I love the United States. I've said it earlier, I'll say it again. I love Americans. I spent 20 years of my life down here, and you can't ask for two greater nations in the world. Let's stick together, and please get the message to President Trump. This is not a good idea for both countries. Thank you, and God bless you. Thank you for having me. Oh, thanks. Boy, I haven't seen you in ages. Oh, so it's just, you brightened up my whole day. Anyways, first of all, thank you everyone for joining us today. And we had a great conversation. As you can see, I brought a couple of my colleagues, the two great mayors from London and Kitchener, just great allies. And it's a all government approach, no matter if it's federal or provincial or municipal. It's all about Team Ontario, Team Canada, and really communicating to our American friends, informing how important our relationship is, and building the AMCAN fortress I've been talking about for quite some time to make both countries the wealthiest, the richest, safest, most prosperous two countries in the world. They understand it. These tariffs, in our opinion, a lot of people's opinion, is just going to hurt Americans and it's going to hurt Canadians. We don't want to do that. We want to work collaboratively together with, as we were saying in the room and you heard, family members. And you don't attack a family member. So I'll be open to questions now, and yes.
We just had a gentleman at the podium saying that he had a very good message. He's an American, but it was only about a third of the room were Americans. How do you get in front of more Americans on the trip, make sure the right people hear the message rather than the choir?
Well, great question, Brian. We're going to an event tonight. We'll be networking with senators at those events as well, and Congress men and women. And we have separate meetings. I know my colleagues, all the premiers, are down here as well, that have been setting up a meeting. And make no mistake about it, the White House knows we're down here. All elected officials know we're down here. The American people know we're down here because we care. We care about this deal. We care about the CUSMA deal or USMCA, whatever you want to call it, and just getting our message how we're stronger together, no matter if it's our energy or our manufacturing or the aluminum steel, how important aluminum steel plays in a role down here. So we're getting the message out, and we're happy to be down here, and I'm very happy that the mayors came, and my two ministers, I guess I can't call them ministers, but my two colleagues.
Premier,
Go ahead.
How do you know the White House knows that you're here, number one? Do you have any meetings with anyone within the Trump administration at this point? And number two, do you not see this as the way that Donald Trump has talked about Canada, has talked about tariffs? Is his mind just made up?
I don't know. I can't say. I can't speak for the president, but I think everyone knows his mind can change. What I was concerned about, he said we had a 30-day, little break, negotiation time, and a few days later, all of a sudden, these tariffs come. So we just have to get our message out about we're stronger together. That's the message we want to deliver to the American people and to the elected officials down here.
You raised the fact you can't call them ministers because you can't be called premier because you're actually a campaigning politician. Even though you said you don't like politicians. We'll set that aside.
I've said that a few times.
But I'm just curious. Was it a mistake to call an election now? Would it not have been better to maybe go before Trump's inauguration if you wanted an early campaign, rather than you're in the middle of this? So you're wearing two hats, and you're here at the I guess the Progressive Conservative campaign is paying for you to be here, but then you have government material.
Well, thanks for that question, Rob. We have to outlive and outlast the Trump administration for 4 years. We need a strong mandate from the people of Ontario to carry on our mandate, making sure that we create a strong economic environment for companies to come and invest in cities like London and cities like Kitchener and other cities around this province. That's what we need, and that's what we're asking the people of
Yeah, but
Ontario.
was it a mistake not to go earlier? Because you are wearing two hats now, and there is your opponents back home are saying that you're campaigning, you're breaking the caretaking convention by campaigning while you're in the government.
Yeah, I got cleared by the Integrity Commissioner, but that's here nor there. The Canadian people want us here, not just Ontarians, Canadians. They want all the representatives, all their premiers here, and we're Team Canada right now within all 10 provinces and 3 territories, and we're working very well together.
Mr. Ford, though, in your mind right now, are you the Premier of Ontario or are you the
Yes,
PC party?
I am the Premier of Ontario, officially. I'm still the Premier of Ontario until I'm no longer the Premier of Ontario. But let's hope that doesn't happen.
So why did the PC party pay for your private jet down here?
Because I don't want to go and take money out of taxpayers' pockets. We're in an election mode right now, I understand, and also the opposition thought it'd be a good idea that we pay for it ourselves. And that's one thing I agree with John Fraser about when he says the party should pay. So, see, John and I agree to some things once in a while.
Since yesterday's executive order on steel and aluminium, are you reconsidering retaliation, including reviewing or cancelling Starlink contracts or other measures?
Yeah, I always say everything's on the table right now. Let's see. We'll have an opportunity till I think it was March the 13th, if I'm not mistaken. But we'll be in full discussions with our colleagues here. We'll be talking today and tonight with my fellow premiers, along with the federal government. And believe me, there'll be retaliation. That's the last thing we want to do, by the way.
What Ontario tax dollars are actually going into your trip? Like, for instance, brochure, tonight's reception, logistical help. What are Ontario taxpayers paying for related to this trip?
Well, the government workers, any political side, we're paying for. But I always ask, ask the people of Hamilton. Ask them if it's important that I'm down here. Ask the people from Sault Ste. Marie if it's important that I'm down here. Be it Dofasco that I visited the other day, or Stelco, or Algoma. It's very important because everything's tied in one way or another, be it steel, aluminum, critical minerals, energy. That's what we're focused on. Next one.
Is this a wasted effort? I mean, we just heard from a trade lawyer who basically said the tariffs are coming, yet you spent all this money on a commercial, you have this huge delegation here. We have a room full of people from Canada listening to your speech as opposed to Americans. Is this a wasted effort?
Well, I'll just correct you. It's not a room full of Canadians. There was a lot of Canadians, but a lot of Americans were there. And one of the largest lobbying firms in the country, if not the largest, is the American Chamber of Commerce. And we had their people here. So it's very important that we get the message out. And most powerful tools, there's many, but 2 of them are the American people calling their senator or their congressperson and voicing their opinion. The numbers that we heard in there, and you heard, Americans don't feel it's right to attack their closest, friend and treasured ally. They don't believe in that. So we're going to continue communicating. The worst thing we could do as a country is not show up. That sends a message to the president that we don't care. We care. We care tremendously. We care not only about the Canadians, we care about our American family as well.
But Mr. Ford, what is it going to take to actually get through to President Trump? Everything the Canadian effort has done so far has only delayed what seems to be inevitable. What does it take to actually get through?
Well, Katie, another great question. I actually miss you down at Queen's Park. Maybe we'll ship you back with no tariffs because you're a good person and a good reporter. But, let's all face it. There's no secret. President Trump is probably one of the best negotiators in the world. This is his area of expertise. But we need to sit down. And it's not always just the president. He has great advisors. He has very important key allies that sit in the Senate and sit in the Congress that he needs their support. So we're going to continue communicating our message about the AMCAN Fortress and just working the room, working Washington. And it's so important that we do that.
Can we get your comments on Trump's words about the auto industry specifically? They've been echoed by some of these people like Robert Love. They seem to believe that Ontario stole welding shops, that they didn't exist until recently. It's like they compared to Mexico, the plants
Yeah,
going there. right now.
exactly,
So
yeah.
Can you respond to that?
Well, first of all, that's another reason I'm here, to inform accurate statements, not statements are inaccurate. The facts are, we buy as many cars from the U.S. as we ship down there. The fact is 50% of cars we're shipping down there have American parts. The fact is the steel that they're putting a tariff on, that steel from the U.S. is manufacturing a lot of the cars, not all of them, but a lot of them. So that's the message we're getting down there. The aluminum, they're tariffing. So this is really, really important. And this is where the Canadian public can play a role. So Quebec ships down endless amounts of aluminum because Americans need it. Not that we're just shipping down there, Americans need it. Their aluminum capacity is way down here. If they didn't have imports come in, they'd be lost. But in saying that, so you know the delicious beer that all you guys like to have on a hot summer day, those cans, that aluminum comes from Quebec, goes down to the U.S. It gets printed. They put added value on it. It gets shipped up, and they get filled in Ontario. Same with, without naming the big beverage companies, the big beverage companies, they get their cans made in the U.S. from Canadian aluminum. Added value goes in, they print them, they go up, and they get filled. And it's no different than other supply chains. As I mentioned in there, you can't just flick a switch and unscramble the eggs. You know, you just have to make a bigger omelet, as we say, and that's what we need to do.
Do you think Canada should speed up or attempt to speed up the renegotiation of the USMCA? Do you think that this is where it's all headed?
I think so. I think it's important. Let's get a deal. The only thing certain right now in both economies is uncertainty. And nothing scares companies more than uncertainty. And nothing scares people more. You don't know if you have a job today or tomorrow. That's concerning.
But Trump negotiated the USMCA last time. He always said it was a great deal. Was he lying then or is he lying now?
No, I wouldn't use that word lying. I will tell you one thing. I read that, I saw a book inside, the greatest deal ever, he said. I remember those lines. And now it's not the greatest deal? Well, if he wants to tweak it or whatever, that's what negotiations are all about. Making sure that a good negotiation is when both parties walk away from the table not 100% happy.
Do you think we need a federal election first? Do you think we should have
Yes, yes.
Wait, but you just said why you think we need a federal election first?
Okay, yourself, sorry, and then yourself right after. So federal, yeah,
A lot of what you got into today was
Okay.
on the federal side of things, right?
I don't know what just happened there, but,
Sorry, I thought you said.
no, just taking there.
Laura?
Laura,
No, but
so yes, to answer your question, yes. Because there's uncertainty right now in the federal government around the world. You know, people are concerned who's running our country. Prime Minister Trudeau will be stepping back on, I think, March the 9th. I can't even keep track of the dates. The new leader will be put on March the 9th. People want certainty. Let's go to the people.
Probably will be the last question.
Yeah, sorry.
You ventured into a lot of federal government territory in speaking in the fireside chat, taking on the Digital Service Act, and also foreign affairs. Is this really what the Ontario Premier should be doing, is being so critical of the federal government and federal government policies at this point in time?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. Right now, I think there's a little bit of lack of leadership, to be frank with you, on the federal side, considering we're the economic engine of Canada. We do over $500 billion of two-way trade, third largest trading partner in the world to the United States. I think we need a voice. I think our municipalities behind me need a voice. I'll give you an example. Toronto alone makes up 50% of our GDP in Ontario. They need a voice. Maybe, I always believe in working together, collaboratively. I don't give two hoots what political stripes people come from, and I think I've shown Ontario people that, as long as it benefits Ontario. That's what I'm concerned about. But folks, thank you. I think we'll get together again a couple more times later on. One more. Yeah.
Doing to protect the steel and aluminum industry in the United States?
Well, this is why we're down here, making sure we voice our opinion. You heard some of the colleagues, American colleagues down here, saying this is not good. You know, we aren't banging down the door to the U.S. and saying, take more aluminum. They need it. They need it for their military. They need it for the manufacturing might, and we're going to be shipping it down there. And it's no different than steel. What I'm concerned about is Canada and American interests. They're good. It's China that wants to ship in cheap steel, cheap aluminum, and undermine American and Canadian jobs. But we'll get together again. I want to thank everyone for joining us. Thank you, everyone. I'll be back. Thank you.